All right, everybody, welcome back. Today I have another special guest, a very good friend of mine who lives now in Los Angeles, California. We both, like I said, we both grew up together. We spent 25 years in IT. He's a great dude, but now he's actually an actor. Like I said, moved himself and his family out to California to pursue his dream of being an actor at 42 years old. I'm just super proud of him, everything he's done in his life, everything he's doing. And I think you're going to learn a lot from him and just how he, and his life. And so hopefully this serves as an inspiration to you. But without further ado, I want to welcome James Troup. James, welcome.
Hey, everybody. Great Matters. Thank you. Thank you, Link. Thank you for having me. Thank you for the invitation. I really appreciate it. And I'm looking forward to the conversation, as I always am with you.
Yeah, so this is a good place to start. So because like I said, James and I grew up together. I guess I've known you since I was 6 or 7 years old. I mean, like consciously knew you since I was 6 or 7 years old. We went to the same church together. Then we went to the same middle school together. You know, there's a few things I know about James. Is one, he's one of the realest people. You're one of the realest people that I know. You always have your perspective, whether I disagree with you or not.
Yeah, we disagree often.
We disagree often, but I appreciate you being real and honest and also just really transparent about your life, about your struggles, about your dreams, about your goals. Most people aren't very transparent, and I think it's really refreshing. I have to give you two other descriptors as well. One is persistent. Your persistence is really amazing. Again, we'll get into it later because I love what you're doing.
Hard-headed.
That's you. Well, you have to be hard-headed,
right.
and determined to reach your goals and to be an inspiration to others. So again, man, I appreciate your friendship. I appreciate what we've been through, and I appreciate how you're growing as a person, as an actor, and it's really cool. So maybe you can just start by telling us a little bit about you, your family, and how you grew up.
I'll do that without getting too long-winded. So I am 43 years old at the moment. So I was born in 1977 in Cincinnati, Ohio. And I grew up, I was literally born in one of the oldest housing projects in the nation. That's the Lincoln Courts projects and the Laurel Homes projects. My mom is from Cincinnati, and literally she was like second generation in those same housing projects in that same neighborhood, which is the West End, which is a Black neighborhood in Cincinnati. My father actually grew up in West Memphis, Arkansas. So that's where his family is from. So when I say West Memphis, a lot of people think that maybe it's a suburb of Memphis and it's pretty cool. No. West Memphis is like the armpit of Memphis. So one thing that really struck me, we used to spend maybe about a week or two down in West Memphis, Arkansas every year going to visit his family. And it was a small shotgun house. It was literally sitting up on bricks. So we would climb under the house to catch frogs. And one of the things that struck me is that there were no sidewalks in the neighborhood. And I found that to be really weird because I came from what is essentially the concrete jungle. So everything was concrete around us, not a whole lot of green. And they didn't have sidewalks in the residential areas of West Memphis. So that is how I grew up. I mean, we were poor. We were really poor. I mean, secondhand clothing, food stamps, government cheese. Like I remember standing in line with my mom and my siblings to get our food stamps. It's before they mailed them out in a check to get our food stamps. And I remember standing in line to get the government cheese and the butter and the peanut butter and the powdered milk and things like that. So grew up poor, but the one thing that we always had was love we always had lots of attention from my parents because both my parents were together. I grew up with my father in the same household. We always had instilled in us a great work ethic and a great value for education. So those were things throughout my entire family. There was that, and a great village, because growing up poor in Cincinnati, there when one generation became of age, they just moved like a couple blocks away, if not in the same housing project. So literally there were generations of my family in the same housing project, or within a couple blocks. And I grew up with all my mom's cousins and my mom's aunts and uncles, and so they were like parents to me, and all of their children, who were my first cousins and second cousins and third cousins, I grew up with as siblings. So it was one great big village. But went on to go to one of the best high schools in the city, in the nation, Walnut Hills High School, and then went off to yeah, me and Link went to rival high schools. So but men lie, women lie, numbers don't. Just saying.
Yeah, that's cool.
So and then went on to the University of Cincinnati, got my degree in information systems, and then went on to have a Fortune 500 career in IT.
All right, so I want to take a step back before we get to high school. There's a couple of actually interesting things about elementary schools and our education in Cincinnati that most people don't get and don't really appreciate. I'll get to that in just a second. One thing I want to understand, because you grew up in the projects.
Yeah.
I grew up in the rural white part of Cincinnati.
What neighborhood did you grow up in?
Sailor Park, which is like,
yeah,
which is 5 miles before the Indiana border. It's on the river, the river. Now, did you consider yourself poor though?
You know what? I didn't know that I was poor because I was a child. So I had no real concept of money and things like that, because everyone around me was the same type of poor. I didn't know that I was poor until I got up into to late elementary school, when I started, going over a friend's house, and wow, you live in an actual house. Or when friends came down to visit me, and they're just like, oh my God, everything is concrete. Your walls are concrete, your stairs are concrete. You live in a prison. So I didn't really have a concept of that until I saw how other people were living. And I'm just like, wow, okay, this is being poor.
Okay, yeah, because I actually never felt poor. Actually, well, probably until middle school, when I actually was poor, when my parents split. But but like, we were lower middle class in the rural, in Sailor Park. But I never like felt poor. But I always wondered, because I didn't know the projects. I didn't even move to a semi-Black neighborhood until I was in middle school. So like, it was just a completely different experience. But
let me say that even though we were poor as far as, housing and clothing and things like that, I mean, we always had food. Like there was never a moment where there was nothing in the refrigerator. And I grew up in a household with 2 cars, which I later found out was extremely unusual in the projects.
Right.
The kids who had all the Jordans and the name brand clothes and things like that, they looked at my family as being rich because we had 2 cars and we always had food. Like, my mom was always coming in with groceries, so our refrigerator was never empty. And I found that weird. I'm just like, wait a minute, you're wearing $200 clothes or $200 shoes, and my shoes cost $10, but you're looking at me as being rich because we have 2 buy here, pay here cars, and we always have food in the refrigerator. So it was weird to learn that perspective.
Yeah, that's interesting. You're right, because I didn't think about poverty either, or poverty at all. Again, I had love, and I said, I had an education,
Right.
I just didn't have the clothes that everybody else had,
Right.
right? So I went, it's going to be okay, right?
Yeah.
Like, okay, that's interesting. So one thing I like to people don't understand is that in Cincinnati, and I think it started in the early '80s, were
Hmm.
the magnet schools, the bilingual schools.
Yes. Yes.
Um,
I'm a product of.
yeah. So people are really shocked when I'm here in Europe and I speak fluent French, and they're
Mhm.
like, "How did you learn?" I said, "I've been taking it since I was 5 years old."
Right.
Like, in Cincinnati? I'm like, yeah.
Right.
So tell us about your elementary education. Like, how did that work, and how did that did that kind of open your brain a little bit to the world and life?
Oh God, absolutely. So, in growing up in the projects, we had a school right across the street. So, and that time, everyone went to the school of your neighborhood, your
Hmm.
neighborhood school, which was a school in the projects. It was poor and it was black. So I went there for preschool and kindergarten, and my mom and my aunt will tell this story that my aunt, which is my mom's older sister, would tell her, "You have got to get those kids out of that school. Get them out of that
Hmm.
school," because she saw that school, that underachieving school, as being a hindrance. So
Hmm.
that's when the magnet school program came about, where disadvantaged kids in disadvantaged neighborhoods could go to schools outside of their neighborhoods. Basically, they could go to white schools. All right. So so my mom got me and my siblings into a school called Fairview German Bilingual School. And it was maybe like 3 or 4 miles away, but it was definitely in the white part of town. And they taught German there. And that really, my my parents and by extension my aunts and uncles were always really big on giving us a worldview. Well, I will say giving us a view outside of the projects,
Hmm.
because we would drive to different neighborhoods and go shopping in different neighborhoods and go visit our family in different neighborhoods. And I didn't understand the value of that until I realized, as I got older and became, a preteen and a teenager, that I had friends who had never left our neighborhood.
Hmm.
It's like, wow, how have you never gone to,
Yeah.
the park, that's just 5 miles away? Well, because their parents didn't have a car. So that really limited them. So going to a German school and learning German and being immersed in German culture, and also really for the first time, uh, being around white people,
Mm.
because the projects were 99% black. My teachers at my old school, they were a mix of white and black, but I was never around really any white kids. So
Mm.
going and being around white kids and being around Indian kids and being around Jewish kids and just being around kids from every different nationality and walk of life. Um, I'm not going to say it gave me a really new perspective. First of all, it taught me more about the world, because I developed this love for German culture, which
Mhm.
Cincinnati is actually a German town. So
Mhm.
I developed this love for German culture, but I also became immersed in other people's cultures as well, because my friends were of different nationalities, different races, and they lived in different parts of the city. So it really made me a more well-rounded person.
So I don't know where you stand on things like charter schools and on like what do they call it, school choice.
Yes.
Um, so giving your experience, are you for it, against it, or how are you feeling about
Um,
for the
I,
US crowd?
I'm definitely for it, in the sense of giving underprivileged children a an opportunity to have a great education, because
Mhm.
funding for schools in the United States, school funding is based on property taxes
Mhm.
in the particular neighborhood. So if you live in a poor neighborhood where your property values are low, therefore your property taxes are going to be low. The school that's your neighborhood school is going to be way less funded than, you know, a school that's in a neighborhood that has $500,000 houses. So funding has a lot to do with it. So number one, I'm definitely for underprivileged children having the opportunity to go to the more well-funded schools. But more so, I believe that that schools, no matter what neighborhood that they're in, need to be funded more. The
Yeah.
fact that schools are funded by neighborhood taxes is a travesty. It's a crime because it effectively builds it effectively resegregates schools. So, which is exactly what we're seeing in the United States. Schools are more segregated now in 2020 than they were 10 years after Brown versus Board of Education, which is the court case that desegregated schools.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I think the thing is actually, so I know we're gonna have lots of debates. So, but we're gonna have to do this multiple times. So, I think first of all that Title One actually increases the amount of funding to
mhm,
those inner city schools or those impoverished schools. The
mhm,
problem is that they're spending the money on programs that are just kind of getting people almost up to a basic standard. You know,
right.
there's free lunch programs, stuff like that, special education, stuff like that, instead of
Mhm,
the things like foreign language learning
right.
or arts and education. Like that's part of the problem. It's the funding is actually pretty close. It's actually the way they have to use it because of the parts of the
Right. I mean, which is basically making up for the gap that racism has caused. So
hmm,
we're looking at um, we're not creating equity. You know, equality and equity are two totally different things.
yeah,
So
for sure. All right, so we're going to get back into the racism part because I have some questions in particular. I have some questions, but I'll get to it later. So you go to German school.
yes,
People should understand that is a possibility to go to a bilingual school. When did you start? In kindergarten
I
or
started in first grade, but the school
first?
actually starts in kindergarten.
Okay, your sister started in third grade. Then you guys
My
all
sister started in the first grade since my older sister. So she started in the first grade, and then my brother started in kindergarten.
in kindergarten. Okay.
Younger brother.
So I started in kindergarten. My older sister, well, one of them started in second grade, but she
Hmm.
had to get tutoring in order to start because she had
Hmm.
to catch up. But yeah, so you're able to do this, opens your mind to new types of people, new types of cultures,
Absolutely.
and then we went to the same church as well.
Yes.
So New Prospect Baptist Church. Uh,
Hmm.
uh, what was your How did church play a role for you growing up? Um, how did it play a role in your life besides
Um,
being dragged to church every Sunday?
right. I was about to say because church as a child was just something that you did, something that
Mhm.
you were forced to do. Um, so it was literally just sitting in church and just being bored out of my mind for 3 hours because there was none of this 45-minute church that there is in
No.
2020. No, church was very, very long, and luckily we had air conditioning, like a lot of churches did not. But um, I come from two religious parents, and Black people. You know, we were force fed Christianity back in slavery, so that has passed through the generations. So church in itself, while I didn't understand God and spirituality, you know, as a child, because what child does, uh, it gave me a sense of community, I will
Mhm.
say. It gave me an extension to my village. It
Mhm.
gave me a sense of pride because when I went to church, there were Black people from all walks of life. You
Mhm.
know, there were Black people who were doctors, who were lawyers, who, you know, drove these fancy cars, and I'm just like, wow, what does this person do for a living? So and it also extended my friend base as well because most of my friends were from my neighborhood or from the projects, and all of a sudden I'm having friends who come from, you know, these well-to-do families and things like that. So um, so church really did that for me. But as I got older, church, I began to, you know, enjoy church and began to question religion, and it gave me a spiritual base, and
Mhm.
one that I depend on heavily to this day, because I wouldn't be where I am right now without, I can't even say without my faith in God, because my faith in God has waned, and you know, it's gone back and forth over my adult life. But without God's grace, which I wholeheartedly depend on, and thank God for the blessings that He's given me over my life. So it's really given me my spiritual base.
Okay, so you feel like it's still, you still use it. It still is important to you today as well.
Oh, absolutely, without a doubt, paramount.
So do you guys you moved out of Lincoln Heights, right? Like out of the projects.
Yeah, we moved out of the projects in 1991. I like to say that we moved
Ninth
from the
grade?
projects, huh?
The ninth grade?
Um, eighth grade, actually.
Eighth grade, okay.
So right before ninth grade. I like to say we moved from the projects to the hood because I mean, it was basically the same people that were in the projects, just they lived in houses now. So we moved from the projects to the hood, and we moved to Evanston when I was 13 years old, which was an entirely different experience, because when I moved there, I didn't have my family around. I didn't have my siblings, my extended siblings around. I didn't have, you know, my mom's friends who had watched me grow up. You know, I was just literally all alone in this jungle. I didn't know these adults. I didn't know these kids, and it was way more violent
Mhm.
than growing up in the projects. So
How so?
that was um there was, well, here's the thing about growing up in the projects. All right, people look at the projects as being, you know, just terrible and violent and things like that, and but the thing is, in the projects, the violence was between the criminals, okay, the people who were selling drugs, the rival drug factions, and also too, the people who were perpetuating the crime, they knew all of the children, and they knew all of the adults.
Mm.
So literally, you didn't sit outside of Miss Kathy's stoop selling drugs. You didn't do that, because there was a respect there, because these kids grew up with my mother as a mother figure to them.
Mm.
So they went somewhere else and sold the drugs and drank and shot dice and stuff like that. So, and also too, the drug dealers had a respect for the children, because they watched the children grow up, and they actually didn't want the kids to grow up like them. So
Mm.
they're just like, hey, you need to go to school, you need to stop being bad, you need to. So they were all almost like big cousins, and trying to keep the kids on the right path. In Evanston, there was none of that, because I didn't grow up around these people. So the
Mm.
violence that I saw, there was like no respect from the younger kids to the older adults. The violence was just crazy from what I saw. So it was a completely different um, uh, experience.
Okay, so the lack of community, or maybe it's a larger, yeah, the lack of community
Mhm.
is really like, and a lack of structure almost in the projects, like where there's a hierarchy. You know the adults. You
Right.
know,
And
everyone knows each other. It's small enough that
right.
that it's a community, even if it's impoverished, even if there's
Exactly.
violence. It's
Exactly. And that
concentrated.
could be my view of an outsider coming into the Evanston community, because
Yeah.
I was not a part of that community. And it could have also been an escalation in the crack era, you know, because as the crack era started in the 80s, and as crack penetrated more and more neighborhoods and moved out of the inner cities into more of the the outer cities, I won't even say the suburbs, the outer cities, the competition became way more fierce, and so that could have given rise to more violence. Just the evolution of the crack era.
Perhaps. What about okay, so I found it fascinating, which I actually didn't realize, that you grew up in the projects, but you and your parents were together.
Yes,
I
absolutely.
thought that was like almost impossible, right? Like
All my life.
no, but I say, like, did you notice were there other people in the projects who their dad was like in the projects, his dad was around, or
Yes,
were you kind of
absolutely.
like the anomaly?
No, we were not the anomaly. That's the thing. Most of my friends in the projects, their dad was in the house with them.
Hmm.
I mean, I can rattle off a bunch of names of my friends whose fathers were in the home. And if their fathers weren't in the home, the few kids that I knew whose fathers weren't in the home, their father and their parents weren't together, their fathers were just, a mile or two away, walking distance away. So their
Okay.
fathers were literally always around, coming around, playing ball with us and things like that. So
Hmm.
the poverty that I grew up in, the Black experience that I grew up in, fathers were around everywhere. Fathers and uncles and cousins, men were everywhere.
Okay, so then what about in the hood?
Um, in the hood, I can't really say that I saw less fathers,
Hmm.
um, and that could be because I didn't really have the relationships that I had
Fair
in the
enough.
projects that I did in the hood. But I could say that I saw less fathers. My
Yeah.
my father was one of the only ones. And then I noticed something about just living in in a typical neighborhood with houses and things like that. People don't know their neighbors. And
Hmm.
I even realized that when I was 25 and I bought my first house in a mostly white neighborhood, that people come out of their house, they get in their cars and they go. They don't
Right.
really spend time outside, and the kids don't play outside and things like that. So people don't know their neighbors. So it could have been that as well.
Yeah, I mean, well, I'll just say from my experience, Cincinnati, rural white town, we knew everybody, and I lived in a house. Like we had a 5-bedroom house. Like it wasn't big, but it was a
Wow.
we had a 5-bedroom house. And when my parents were together, like I knew everybody. I still know them.
Yeah.
When I go to Cincinnati today, I go and visit them.
Hmm.
Again, most people were white around me unless they were cousins
Hmm.
or a few who weren't related to me.
Yeah.
But pretty much all houses, everybody knew everybody.
Wow.
I never had that experience where I actually only started having that experience once I moved to New Jersey, where I think it's kind of cultural for New Jersey more than anything, actually,
Yeah.
of just people not knowing each other. But I wanted to go back to the whole father in the home part because, we could say it's crack, we could say it's fathers, we could say it's lots of things, but I'm just trying to notice, like, get information on, like, what's the reality of the situation on the ground, right? Like, because, and everybody's experience is going to be completely different.
Right. Right.
Your experience was when there were houses, there were no people didn't know each other. My experience is when there's houses, we all knew each other,
Right.
right? So it's like we all have different perspectives and views on how that works.
Hmm.
Okay, so um you move into the hood. There's a
Yep.
lot more violence. How do
Hmm.
you avoid the violence?
Oh my God, avoiding the violence, the structure from my family, the
Mm,
structure from my parents. That is absolutely how we avoided the violence. Because, funny, there was an apartment complex just around the corner from us. It was called St. Ledger's. It's not there anymore. If you're familiar with the movie New Jack City, it was like the Carter.
you
All
don't
right.
know. Yeah.
Yeah. So when we first, funny, my mother's father used to live there. And I remember going there once when I was like 6 years old. But when we first moved to Evanston, the first thing that my mother told us was that if I catch you over there in St. Ledger, around St. Ledger, you are dead, period. I will kill you. So St. Ledger was off limits, period. And also I come from parents that paid attention to who our friends were. So,
Mm-hmm.
and my parents didn't allow us to play with the bad kids. They said, nope, They knew the kids that were bad influences. And they said, if I catch you playing with so-and-so, I will kick your ass, period. And it was like that when we moved to Evanston as well. If I catch you playing with A, B, and C, if I catch them around, I will kick your ass, period. So we had our parents watching over us and watching over who our friends were and who the bad influences were, and making sure that those were weeded out of our lives, making sure that my parents knew where the hot spots were, making sure that we were nowhere around the hot spots to even get caught up in any type of drama. And also, they kept us busy. I mean, I guess we kind of kept ourselves busy with the different school programs. I was in band, I was in choir, I was working in church, our
Oh,
church
always
groups.
church. Yeah.
Yeah. So we were too busy to get into trouble. So the guidance and the structure of my parents is literally what kept me alive, what kept us alive, because a lot of the kids that I know from back then that didn't have the guidance and the structure didn't make it.
Yeah, that's I think you're spot on. It's crazy. There's even once my parents had split up, and by the time I was a teenager, I went, the one thing I always knew is if I did something stupid, my mom was gonna know.
Oh
And when
yeah.
she knew, like, then I was dead. And so
Yep.
did I really want to be dead? I don't think so.
I was
So
more afraid of my parents than anything.
yeah. So it's like, nah, just keep yourself
Mm-hmm.
keep yourself on the straight and narrow. So importance of parents, that's great. Like that's interesting. So you go to the best high school in the nation.
One of
Um,
the best high schools in the nation, the
uh,
best public school in the nation at
we'll
the
say
time.
the most arrogant public school in the nation. We'll call them that.
Oh, hey,
No,
we
I'm
heard
just
that
kidding.
arrogance.
So yeah, you go to Walnut Hills High School. For you started in the ninth grade, I guess.
I started in ninth grade, so yeah, 4 years.
So you did 4 years there. Did that kind of expand your horizons as well, or was that like
It's interesting. It was a continuation of what started happening when I went to the magnet school in elementary, and
mhm,
then I went to another magnet school, Cincinnati Bilingual Academy, in middle school. So it was just a continuation of the environment and the community that I had started growing up with in elementary school. So it
mhm.
was just a continuation. Yeah, but yeah.
Do you remember? It's like, okay, so we went to Cincinnati Bilingual Academy together.
Mhm.
Do you remember? I know for me, like there was a day that clicked when like things that are international like mattered to me. Did you do you have anything like for you where you went, wow, like the world is a bigger place, like um maybe at school or church or anything. I don't know if there was something for you like to go, I want to do something big. I want to really succeed in life.
That was, to be honest, that was instilled in me from birth,
Mm,
literally. Because my parents always drilled into my head, you are going to be a leader, not a follower.
mm,
If you get into some trouble and I find out that you followed somebody into some trouble, you're going to be in even more trouble. If you get in trouble, you better have been the person that was leading the pack. So that was the mantra for my parents. But we were always shown that there was more, even if it was just more outside of our projects. There was
mhm,
more outside of the city, because we would travel to Arkansas, and we would travel to Atlanta, and we would travel to Michigan, where we had family. And then when I was 12 years old, my cousin graduated from Harvard.
mm,
So my first cousin. And so we got on a plane, which was my first plane ride. So I was able to go to uh, to Harvard and witness the graduation. And then so my extended family, they were all doing bigger and better things that I couldn't even fathom at the time because I was so young. But I was always surrounded by greatness because of my family. And it was understood that my participation in that tradition of excellence was mandatory. So it
Isn't
was
that
an
funny?
expectation.
Isn't that funny that even you say, because when most people say, I grew up in the projects, you think it's a death sentence almost. Like you actually, like, at least the stereotype is that, oh my God, like it's gonna be so bad for you. But you go, wait a second, two parents who love you, good education,
Mm-hmm.
a cousin who graduates from Harvard, and you're
Mm-hmm.
like, no, we just lived here. We don't like, it's not,
I'm
was
from
it,
the projects. I'm not of the
oh,
project.
there you go.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
There you go.
But it's what I learned in growing up, because I used to think that there's no excuse. If you come from wherever, then you can make it because I made it, so you can make it. There's no excuse. I used to be really adamant about that until I stopped and realized that not everybody who grew up in the projects, who started in the same place that I did, had everything that I had.
Yeah.
Not everybody had two parents that loved them. Not everybody had two parents. Not everybody grew up in a healthy, functional household. There were no drug problems in my household. There were no anger problems. There was no domestic violence in my household. My parents were, for the most part, always gainfully employed. There was no, I grew up in a household where both my parents valued education and instilled that in me. Not all of my friends in the projects had that. That instilled a work ethic in me. Not all of my friends who grew up in the projects had that. And actually, the kids who ended up selling drugs and getting into trouble and going to jail were the ones who did not have that. So the family unit was the thing that saved me, because if I had grown up in other people's family unit that had all of those problems, there's no way that I could have gotten where I am. No way.
Yeah. So let's start to fast forward a little bit, because I want to get through and like, so understand. So you go to University of Cincinnati.
Yeah.
Major in IT, information technology.
I eventually found my way to the information systems program. Yeah, because I graduated Walnut Hills with a 1.9 GPA.
Oh.
Yeah. As Miss Atkins would say, by the skin of my teeth.
So for people who don't understand, a 1.9 GPA is basically a C- average.
Yes.
C-.
A C- average, absolutely.
Yeah.
And that was because I got lazy in high school. Like, I got super lazy. Like, school was my job, and when I left, that was it. I wasn't doing any homework. I wasn't studying. I wasn't doing anything. So I coasted through high school and graduated with a 1.9 GPA, even though my mother and my father always told us, like, literally from middle school on, we don't have any money for college. So you have to get a scholarship. Y'all have to get scholarships because we don't have any money for college. So, and I'm just like, yeah, whatever. Literally, I wasn't concerned about college. I was more concerned about girls and playing basketball and playing video games. I wasn't concerned about college until the middle of my senior year, when my friend circle started getting their college acceptance letters. And I'm just like, oh man, what am I going to do? So,
had you even applied
to Howard? I wasn't getting into Howard. Yeah, no, not with a 1.9 GPA. Yeah, so no, I didn't apply to college until July, after I graduated. And then I got into the University of Cincinnati. They had a 2-year college. I got into that.
Okay.
And which was easy. I mean, as long as you had a pulse, you could get in there. So, and I got into that. That's when I knew I was going to college, maybe about a month before college started.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
I didn't know that, did you?
No, I didn't. No, I didn't. It's funny because for me, I just said, I'm not applying to any school that's anywhere close to Cincinnati. I got to get out. I'm out.
I wish I had. I really do. Hmm.
Really? Why?
Simply to be on your own and
Mm,
to just experience a different city and a different way of life and to different food and different people and just to have an expanded life experience. I
yeah.
tell my nieces and nephews all the time. I have two nephews that are seniors now. I'm like, go away for college.
Yeah.
Get out of Cincinnati. Go. Leave your parents behind. They will be okay. Go and experience life because life is short.
Yeah, I actually found because you went to high school with some of my friends,
Hmm.
and then they went to University of Cincinnati, and
Hmm.
they're a year ahead of me.
Hmm.
And we would hang out, and I would go be senior year, and I would just go, "This is extended high school. I can't do this.
Yeah. Hmm.
This is high school 2.0," and I hated high school. So
That's
since
me.
I hated high school, there was no way I was going to do that too. And then I just said, no, this is, and plus, for me personally, I had become a person that I didn't want to be. And I
Uh,
said, the only way I can is I got to leave. I
right.
have to go become something else.
Hmm.
But that's not about me. But so you go to UC, you start with the 2-year program, you transition into the 4-year program, I guess.
Yeah,
Um,
I got my grades up enough,
eventually,
and yeah, ended up graduating the College of Business and the Information Systems program with a 3.2 GPA.
that's cool.
Yeah,
All
so
right, congrats.
not bad at all.
It's not how you start; it's how you finish.
Absolutely, absolutely,
So you got in
hmm
and you made the most out of it.
absolutely.
Um,
Listings list. I
that's
was
cool.
working hard.
That's cool. Did you? So, a couple of the things that are really interesting to me because, like I said, you're a really transparent person, and
Hmm.
I know, like, just over the years, like how your career, your IT career has been pretty successful. Like you haven't been you've done pretty well. You did pretty well
Um,
in IT.
I would have to say so. When I was about to graduate, and I graduated in 2001, right before the economy crashed. Thank you so much. But one of the most coveted job, well, the most coveted job coming out of the College of Business was for Accenture, which
Mm-hmm.
was Anderson Consulting
Consulting, yeah.
at the time. And I got hired on at Anderson Consulting. I got hired on at Anderson Consulting 6 months, 8 months before I graduated.
Nice.
So I secured that job. At the time, it was $50,000 salary, which was huge for a graduating senior coming right out of college. So I
And
went,
in Cincinnati, by the way.
and in Cincinnati, yes. So
Yeah.
I went right into, I mean, what's arguably the best IT company in the world.
Mm-hmm.
So and just learn the corporate America ropes from there.
So
So
why do you think they hired you though?
interesting. I've never thought about that. Um, let me give some background as well. When I was 14 years old, um, there was a community employment program called Citizens Committee on Youth,
Mm-hmm.
CCY, and they would give underprivileged youth summer jobs. I mean, it could range anywhere from sweeping the streets of downtown Cincinnati to working at the IRS. And I happened to get placed at the IRS, the Internal Revenue Service, downtown Cincinnati. And I started doing the computer work that people didn't want to do. So I was working on early versions of the Lotus spreadsheet and doing flow charting and micro and word processing and all of those things. So I really got immersed in corporate culture there as well. I had two aunts that worked for the city. So, and I was always in their office, and they were always having me do things around the office. You know, hey, get on the computer and type out this, or run backups on this cassette tape. So that's where I got an affinity for technology.
Mm-hmm.
So, but why they hired me, I think number one because of my resume, because uh, again I had 4 years at the IRS when I graduated high school. I went on to work in technology for Circuit City. I was selling computers. So I think it was number one because of my resume. And do I think that my black skin had something with getting me in? Absolutely. Yep. Because the way that I look at racism, especially in corporate America, is that because I'm black, racism tells white people to not expect much from me. So my black skin already sets the bar of expectation really low. And then when I come in and sit down and talk to you, and I'm intelligent, and I speak just like the smartest white people who have come in and sat in front of you, then that makes me look head and shoulders above everybody else, because your expectations were already so low for me that exceeding your expectations of this black person is not hard at all. Because I'll tell anybody, I'm one of the smartest people that you will ever meet. And I hands down believe that. I'm one of the smartest people that you will ever meet. So my intelligence is second to none. So when I sat down in front of them, I blew their minds because they weren't expecting much from me anyway. So, and the fact that, I'll say that. I exceeded their expectations.
Yeah, I think George Bush called it the soft bigotry of low expectations. And yeah, I can understand that. I think actually though, well, I don't know why they hired you. I like to ask the question just because, just to see where you go with it. But okay.
I mean, honestly, I was one of the best candidates, period. Yeah. Because again, I'm one of the smartest people that you will ever meet. So I was highly qualified.
Okay. So really, I have found a lot of people who maybe benefited from affirmative action, or who think they did, actually sold themselves short from thinking that it was affirmative action that got them into a certain job, and they go, or a certain school or whatever. And sometimes it is. I'm not saying it's not. But I have also, like, I actually think when you believe that about yourself, you are actually selling yourself short and forgetting that you have skills and values. Like, I didn't have the highest GPA in school. In college, I had a pretty high one in high school. But in college, no. But I had more work experience at major companies.
Bingo.
Than pretty much anybody in my company.
Absolutely.
And I knew how to tell my story better than anybody. And I had actually embraced what some people would call poverty.
Absolutely.
I just called it an opportunity to figure out some new ways to succeed. But I would.
The way that I grew up is a badge of honor for me.
Exactly. So I said, instead of selling myself short and thinking that I'm strictly a beneficiary of my race being helping me get something, I'm going, no. Like, not only am I smart, but it's not just me being smart. I've done things that matter that most other kids, while they were swimming in the summertime, I was putting on a hard hat and boots and managing projects at the Bear Corporation. Right. And then working at a restaurant at night, and then, doing whatever I had to do. So I think it's good not to sell yourself short. So I appreciate how you answered that.
It's interesting that you bring that up, because this is something that I don't think that I've ever really told anyone, that in college, I specifically stayed out of the Black groups, if you will, the Black employment groups, and that would go on glorified field trips to companies, and I stayed out of those because I didn't want to be viewed as the Black candidate. I didn't want to be viewed as a charity case. And let's be real, when I got into corporate America, they would literally say, "Oh, the Black kids are coming today." I would actually hear that when the Black groups from college would come through, and I wanted to compete on my own merit not on the merit of my blackness. I wanted to compete with, because I mean, there were no white groups going to the corporate or to offices and to companies and things like that. There may have been, I don't know, but I wanted to compete one-on-one with every single other person, and I wanted to win based solely off that. So I didn't want to be viewed as one of the black kids. I wanted to be viewed as one of the candidates, period.
So I love that. So you won, obviously, because you got into Accenture, which is hard to get into. Almost I didn't accept it into Accenture.
Because you didn't go to Walnut Hills.
that is the reason. Yes. Yeah. So man.
Screw you off.
So, I'm gonna leave it. But I have to ask you this then. Should there then be affirmative action if you can be a person who says, I just wanted to be evaluated on my skills instead of being evaluated on my skin color?
Here's the thing about affirmative action. First of all, let me dispel a myth that most Americans have about affirmative action. Affirmative action was not just about Black people. In fact, the biggest group that's a beneficiary of affirmative action is white women.
Yep.
White women became a protected class with affirmative action. Affirmative action was about Black people. Affirmative action was about white women. Affirmative action was about the differently abled. Because those little ramps on the sidewalk that go down for wheelchairs, that was a result of affirmative action. So affirmative action was not just about Black people. Affirmative action was about trying to level the playing field for groups that had been discriminated against historically. Which handicapped people were one of those, which women were one of those, and which Black people were also one of those. So affirmative action is absolutely necessary and actually doesn't go far enough in creating equity in American society. So absolutely necessary.
So how so?
Because
how does it not go far enough?
Because there's still inequity in our society. That's how it didn't go far enough. It didn't address the systemic issues that caused the inequity in the first place. It didn't address the wealth gap. It didn't address the education gap. It just said, hey, maybe you have to hire so many people of color. You have to have so many contracts awarded to minority companies, but it didn't address the gaps in actually getting the education to be hired at those companies.
Okay, I'm going to say it a different way. I'm going to ask it a different way. You just said that you specifically didn't join the Black groups because you want it to be defined based on your.
I want it to be
viewed based on your skills. Your parents put things into you. You went to the phony best high school in the country. You graduated. You had job skills through internships, through work experience. Why would we need special programs then?
I have a very easy, simple answer to that.
Sure.
Racism.